So we're here with, of course, it's another. We're going to do a special bonus edition of Corona Money Talk with Dylan Ratigan, of course, New York Times bestselling author, award-winning journalist, and former host of his own show on CNBC, MSNBC, and now he does a podcast for Tasty Trade with Tom Sosnoff. I always forget the name of it. What is it called?
Truth or Skepticism.
Truth or Skepticism over at tastytrade.com.
I've applied a lot of skepticism to the current stimulus legislation. Not a lot of truth. Not a lot of truth.
Not a lot of truth. All right, so let's get right to it, I say.
Sure.
So now, this article in Medium, and why don't
Is this the Umair Haq article?
Yeah. How do you say his name?
Mm-hmm. Umair Haq.
Okay. So he wrote this article in Medium, and let me just. So we'll go, but I'm just going to go through some of it, and then we'll comment on it. And so he's talking about what the United States is going to look like after the Congress and the president is done screwing us through all these stimulus packages. After they impose an economic shutdown on every business, and then they rejigger the economy to screw everybody, except the very, very wealthy. And a lot of people are afraid.
More than that, they actually provide a ton of resources to the very wealthy to accelerate their consolidation while simultaneously shutting down all the small businesses while keeping the targets of the world open, such that the future existence of small business is highly compromised, if not eliminated, for half of them, while the market share for the largest businesses is massively expanded as a government policy.
And it's almost like if you were a sociopath and you took over a country, this is what you would do.
That's right.
It's not even almost like. So here's what.
Or it would just be if you were partnered with the largest businesses to extract a country to its bone. This is what you would do.
This is what you would do. So it looks grim, and how grim is it? Well, this article paints an even grimmer picture than I was, and I've been screaming how grim it's going to be. This is even grimmer than I thought, and so here it comes. Coronavirus, or more accurately, the lack of response to it, will probably finish off what's left of the American economy. America will end up a country with permanently lower levels of all of the following: employment, income, savings, trust, happiness, assets, and so forth. Permanent lower levels of all those things. America was all.
Yeah, it's a restructuring. It's a restructuring like Brazil, remember?
Yeah, they're restructuring so what made our country great and what made immigrants want to come to this country was that we had an economic system that created a middle class, right? So now there is no middle class anymore. They've been crushed. 80% of workers before this were working paycheck to paycheck. So here he goes on, he says, America was already in the process of becoming something very much like a poor country with the failed politics of one too. But coronavirus will accelerate and finalize America's grim transformation into poverty paralysis and collapse. So he talks about the 5 things that are going to happen, these 5 consequences of what they're doing right now in Congress and with this coronavirus. He says, first, because waves of businesses have closed, the nature of unemployment changes. It goes from a short-term challenge to find work to a long-term lack of jobs. So what does that mean, Dylan? Talk to me about that. What is the difference between go from a short-term challenge to find work to a long-term lack of jobs at all?
Well, again, when you have many enterprises, and remember, most jobs are created by not small businesses, but by new businesses. And so in order to have new businesses, you need to have a lot of money available in small amounts to many people so that people with ideas can get $10,000, $5,000, $25,000, $50,000, $2,000, $100,000 to initiate experiments in enterprise, whether it's candlestick making, soap making, furniture making, whatever it is. then when you have those abundant amounts of small amounts of money, you have a very diverse, very resilient, very active new business economy. When you eliminate the new and small businesses, then what happens is you end up with a very small number of employers with relatively low-paying jobs at giant companies like Target or wherever, and those number of jobs are finite, and the amount of money that's available to create new small businesses, new YouTube channels, and pick any category, the ability to initiate something new that's small in size is not eliminated, but is significantly reduced. And as a result, the pool of human beings who would have gone back to the job at the candlestick maker, at any of these, I'm using candlestick maker, I suppose, so it's a little bit, I suppose that's a storybook reference, but you get my point.
Yeah, I get your point.
All of those jobs, because those businesses have been eliminated from the economy, there's no business to go back to, and there's no business to create, because all of the business has been consolidated between the mega stores, the mega digital operations, and the Amazons of this world. So it creates a much bigger pool of human beings who no longer can create a new business or create a new or secure a new job, because the mega businesses are optimized to limit the number of people first, and the number of people they employ, whether it's Walmart or somebody else, they're trying to do it with the lowest possible labor costs.
So what you're saying is those businesses, those small businesses, they're not ever coming back, and so all the commerce that was taken up by those are going to be absorbed into large businesses, and so there will be a permanent high unemployment rate in America.
That's right. Plus permanent high unemployment and no health care for those people, by the way.
And no health care. Okay, so the next thing he says, that brings me to the second transformation. He talks about 5 transformations of our country's economy. He says, so the second transformation is depression reek. Economies grow permanently poorer. Yes, as in forever. That's already happening in America too. Yesterday's, if not great, but somewhat decent jobs were already being substituted away by the new gruesome gigs that modern-day American techno capital offers, driving an Uber, delivering an Instacart, selling a pallet on Amazon. But coronavirus has accelerated all that. So what does that mean? What does he mean by depressions reek, economies grow permanently poorer?
So think of it like this. When you have, let's say you have 20 kindergartners in a kindergarten class. If everybody in that class has a relatively similar amount of cookies, there are a lot of cookies between all of those people that they can then exchange with each other for brownies or magnets or whatever the kids want to trade with each other. So now you have all these magnets and all these brownies and all these cookies and all these things that are going back between the kids, because all the kids have some amount of currency to function with, being the currency of cookies, brownies, and magnets. But when one of the kids has all of the cookies, brownies, and magnets because they're friends with the teacher, and the teacher has made the rules where only if you are a comedian with a YouTube channel who lives in Pasadena are you allowed to have cookies, because the government's making policies or the teacher's making policies where only that person gets all the cookies. Then you have the other 19 students in the class have absolutely nothing, and so they can't trade anything with each other, and they can't get access to basic food. And as a result, you now have a permanently poorer economy, because money is not only money or currency services are only as valuable as the number of people that are able to trade inside of it. And as you eliminate huge sections of the economy from their ability to trade in the economy, then the overall economy loses structurally and permanently value.
Okay. So there will be just be permanently a more poorer people. There'll be a bigger underclass.
Yeah, Brazil.
Like Brazil. Okay. And then he moves on to his third. He says, so what happens to poorer societies? He says they're left in a kind of terrible paradox, which is my third transformation. They can't afford the very things they need to survive most. Why is it that the average American is the only person in the rich world by now who still votes against their own health care, retirement, education, childcare, and so on because they can't afford it. So what he's saying is most people in America are living on the margins right now anyway. And so when they hear a social program being proposed that they think will raise their taxes or cost them more money, they're instinctively and reflexively against it because they think they can't afford it. Is that what he's saying?
That's your traditional sort of conservative who votes against their theoretical self-interest because they're already struggling as it is to hold on to what they have. The last thing they want to do is see the government taking the last of what they have and giving it away.
So what is he saying, that states are going to go bankrupt now, and so what they're going to have to do is raise taxes, which most people don't have the money to pay, so that they're going to now have to reduce services, right?
That's right.
So wow. Okay, so moving on. America was already becoming too poor of a society to have functioning public goods like healthcare or retirement for all, and coronavirus is going to seal that fate. America will be poor now, far too poor to ever really make the transition to having decent public goods. Think of that full half of the American population who's now not employed. How exactly are they going to afford the higher taxes it takes to have a European or Canadian style social contract? They struggled to before, and after coronavirus, it's going to be flatly impossible. Do you agree with that assessment?
Of course, it's mathematical. When you remove the last of the basic resources and the basic tradable economy, which is all those small businesses, all those little services that go on, when you remove that from the economy, you eliminate the ability for any of those things to exist, and then by definition, you have a permanently impoverished underclass, which is what the Nancy Pelosi is really working to make sure happens.
She really is. And he says that brings me to my fourth transformation. As a result of the Depression, an economy's whole structure tends to change as groups, classes, and segments. Think of America not so long ago. Its structure resembled a bell curve, a broad middle class, a small number of rich, and a larger but still small number of very poor. And then around 2010, for the first time, America's middle class became a minority. The gentle bell curve was on its way to becoming something more like a U-shape, a caste society of very rich and everyone else. The imploded middle and the old working class who became the left behinds, all of whom became the new poor, that 80%. That's the 80% living paycheck to paycheck. Coronavirus will accelerate that change too. America's already dying middle class and working class will finally crumble and coalesce into one vast, permanent underclass. America will have effectively a massive pool of something very much like easily algorithmically exploited techno-feudal neo-serfs. That's quite a phrase. People who've reverted to servitude to make a living. Only their overseers are an app. These low-income service jobs are economist jargon for people becoming servants again. To whom? The kakistocracy. So tell me, talk about that. So we're all gonna. So we don't manufacture anything here. We don't make anything that. And so we're all gonna be coming into these gig jobs that don't pay anything,
or just clicking on things
and
on our phones.
And so
I spent some time in rural Burma.
Yeah,
where they don't. It's pre-industrial, so there's no plumbing, there's no cement, there's no metal. It's wood and mud and huts, but they all have phones.
Huh. Wow. So what does he mean by a kakistocracy? What is that? Do you know?
That's just his phrase for the overclass, the super rich. It's just Umair likes to use fancy words.
Okay. He says, and that brings me to my fifth and final transformation. What happens to societies with imploded structures? The gentle bell curve of a modern society, a broad middle, is so crucial because it underpins and anchors democracy. Democracy is a luxury. It takes time. It takes money and effort. To be a democratic society, a society of servants is rarely a truly democratic one. Think historically for a moment, for the simple reason that, well, servants are too busy being exploited around the clock to really engage with the res publica, the body politic. So when a society's structure implodes from a gentle bell curve into a U shape, it's usually accompanied by political implosion too, into authoritarianism, theocracy, fascism, or any number of other tyrannies. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's an inevitable consequence of creating the underclass and the superclass.
So he's saying that there won't be a revolution like there isn't a revolution in, say, India or Brazil or historically, is because those people who should be revolting are too busy scrambling, being exploited, that's what I've said, why they won't give us health care, is the reason why they won't give you health care in America is because if you did, it would make it much easier for you to strike, and it would be much easier for you to take control of your lives away from the corporation. But I don't know. That seems almost obvious, right?
It is, but people don't think about it beyond their own personal circumstances. They don't think about it as a systemic implication across tens and hundreds of millions of people. They just think about it as it relates to themselves. Umair's point is when you make that the de facto standard operating procedure for the society, it creates the dynamic that he's describing. And then by the time people do try to protest, power has been so richly consolidated that they can simply kill the protesters, as countries like China might and have and do, or Russia or Iran. Once you consolidate power to the point where you have the massive underclass and the superclass, like the time to protest is when you have a relevant enough and a viable enough middle class and democracy that the political overlords are not willing to go to straight murder and incarceration to put down protest. But as the power imbalance becomes so fully consolidated, it becomes easier and easier for the superclass to use violence, incarceration, and murder as a mechanism to suppress, as they do, again, in Iran, in North Korea, et cetera.
So here's his final paragraph I'll read to you. It says, America's social structure collapsing foretold the rise of Trumpism. If you understood what the implosion of the middle class meant in 2010, you could have predicted Trumpism a mile out. I did. And what I see today is only worse. Societies growing poorer can't just not afford functioning social systems. They can't afford democracy either. America was on that trajectory, but coronavirus is like adding a rocket engine to it. How democratic a nation do you think America will be when a full half of its population is now not in employment? You can already see that Americans hover between despising each other and being totally indifferent to each other. When self-preservation is an everyday struggle, that's the result. But the struggle for American self-preservation is about to get a whole lot harder, more intense, more painful, more tragic. And that spells the end of America's time as a democracy, too, most likely. Do you agree that I've been telling people your democracy's already been stolen from you since I started this show, because it has. It's been proven academically by the Princeton study. It doesn't matter what the bottom 80% of earners in America think or what they want done. It doesn't get reflected in legislation. So when he says that we've already lost our democracy, right?
Yeah, functionally, yes. I mean, we have the branding of democracy, but obviously we don't have a democracy because no one in the country wants all the largest companies to get all the resources, and no one in the country wants to have the most expensive healthcare in the world, twice the world's healthcare costs, and have nobody have healthcare. So a democracy represented the interests of the people. There's a reason 85% of the people don't feel that politicians represent them.
Right, which because they don't. That would probably
But because they were the consolidation of the two parties, and because whatever the delusion people had on either side, thinking that they were taking their interests, I'm hopeful that the coronavirus has proven to people that that these two parties are a single party, a single ruling party, exploiting them violently.
Yeah,
really.
The beauty or the nefariousness or the insidiousness of a two-party system is that they can in perpetuity blame the other people. And that's all they do is then, hey, we'll put in our guy. So, oh, you hate George Bush? It's because he's a Republican. We're going to put in our Democrat. We put in a Democrat. He does exactly the same stuff, even worse than George Bush was doing. Oh, you hate your life got worse under Barack Obama. We're going to put in a Republican. He does exactly, if not worse, the stuff that Barack Obama was doing. It's amazing. That's like there is no difference in party rule right now. And Nancy Pelosi won't even give you health care in the middle of a pandemic. And the people who are progressives in Congress won't even call her out or revolt against her. The most we can hope for is for them to ask her in a stern way on a phone call. That's it. So, what again, the reason why I wanted to read this to people or share this article with people and get your commentary is because I think that article is an even starker future more dystopian future than we've been laying out here. And that guy seems to know what he's talking about. He's according to him, he predicted Trumpism.
Yeah, he's a big Harvard writer. I mean, he's a Harvard intellectual who was sort of ultimately moved to London because he couldn't take it anymore, and now writes these observations.
Yeah, but it's everywhere. It's not just here. So how would you like to sum up, Dylan, that article or where we are right now?
My bottom line is I really recommend everybody start to learn, study, and understand the really effective protest methods of both Hong Kong and France, which are based on an extremely well-organized but pulsing methodology as opposed to a permanent occupation. It's much more effective to have these pulse surge type of protests where people, A, get to live at home, and B, don't have to live in the street, and C, when the pulse surge happens, it's much more overwhelming and has many more participants. So I would really recommend people study that and begin to practice it.
So what little I know about how the yellow vests function in France is that what you were saying before is they would meet every Saturday, and it doesn't have to be the big protest, but it keeps the protest active. So when you really need to shut some shit down, it's always been there. It never went away. And so it's much easier.
It's a consistent pulsing.
Right.
And it's beats of a pulse that lasts over time.
Right.
And Hong Kong really mastered it, but France was also brilliant at it. And it attracts way more people can participate in the pulse surge type of a protest. It doesn't have to be violent at all. It's actually way more effective when it's not, as Hong Kong really demonstrated more than anybody. But because it's so much more massive and so much more undeniable and so much less violent and so much less angry, more of a party almost, that is profoundly effective.
And that's what needs to happen. We brought on Jane McLevy. She's a longtime union organizer talking about how to get to a 90% strike. She predicted lots more strikes would happen before the election and lots more after. So we're going to have on tomorrow. Who do we have on tomorrow, Steph? What's her name?
Lisa Fivian.
And she's also a big
activist for decades.
Worker activist, organizer for decades. So that's what needs to happen. That's where it needs to come. And whenever you hear a leader today saying they have some answers to the problems, and if they don't involve direct action or labor unions, worker strikes, then they're not serious. Because that's the only power we have right now. That's it. That's the only power we have.
So I would just study the joyful, nonviolent pulse surge protest strategy, which was optimized last year and is vastly more effective than the angry crowd, which is easily dismissed.
Got pulse.
And is really unattractive.
Right. Now, how would you have categorized what Occupy Wall Street was?
Started out as a beautiful pulse that within 3 weeks, I was living near Zuccotti Park at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Started out as this really beautiful surge of energy that then rapidly degraded into anger and its own sort of low consciousness of power and ego.
Yeah, I don't know about
But it started beautifully.
the leaderless model. I don't think it works. I think you need to have leaders. I understand
Or at least you have to have a shared culture that's based on this pulse surge party.
Right. Hey, so a lot of people were, you brought up China. Whenever someone talks about China on the show, people go fucking crazy.
I saw that.
So when Danny Haifong was on singing the praises of China's one-party state and how they're responsive to the people went nuts. And then when Matt Stoller was on, same thing. He was the other way. And then same thing with you, right? So what do you say to the people, Dylan, who say, hey, those Hong Kong protests are like CIA funded and organized? What is that? So what do you say to that?
I don't think the CIA is so powerful that they can create 3 million people in the street. I think the CIA is powerful enough to create 3,000 people in the street. But if the energy, let's assume the CIA is doing it just for fun of it. I have no idea, but let's assume the CIA is the catalyst. The CIA is not. If the pent up native energy doesn't exist in the first place, how are you going to get half of an entire one of the global capitals into the street?
Right. So you're saying that this might be just one of those situations.
So let's assume CIA lit the match just for our purposes.
Right.
The match can only light something that's a bomb.
Right. Okay. Okay, so I got you. I hear what you're saying. All right. I can't speak intelligently on the subject, so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dylan,
So would you be?
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I think we're done for the day. No.
Yes, we are. I was just about to say goodbye.
That's what I thought.
Thanks again for taking time out. And everybody check out our Corona Money Talk series. This is a part of that. We drop a podcast now every Wednesday. We dropped one today. Did we drop it today? Oh, this is all new to me. I have to have this written down for me. But anyway, we're dropping a coronavirus Money Talk every week with Dylan. And so check that out. And thanks again, Dylan. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great.
Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?